Welcome to a web series on education and the family, brought to you by Creo Early Learning Partners. If you can, please donate to our fundraising efforts by clicking the link on this post. Your contribution will aid teachers and school staff adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In this episode entitled Harmony at Home, Tips for Peaceful Parenting, we are joined by peace education advocate, award-winning children's book author, and Executive Director of the Creative Learning Paths School, Teacher Christine Cannon.
Welcome, teacher team. You are a genuine advocate of peace education. You don't just preach it, you practice it as a parent and a teacher. For the benefit of those watching, how would you define peaceful parenting? What does it look like in action?
Wow, Sam, your question is scary because, I cannot claim to be a peaceful parent or a peaceful teacher. I think peaceful parenting is a journey. It is a never-ending journey towards being more peaceful as a person. So it is really constantly trying your best to practice mindfulness in parenting. And being a mindful parent means that we pay attention to what we are feeling. So we are very conscious of what we're feeling. It does not mean that we will not get angry, we will not get upset. Of course, we will feel negative emotions. That's just natural. But acting on them mindlessly is what compromises our parenting. So peaceful parenting means that we bring our conscious attention to what's happening instead of immediately getting hijacked by our emotions. So we are really emotional. And of course, moms like me, that's our never-ending crooks, no? So it's really pausing and thinking about what we're going through at this very moment when we are encountering a conflict with a child, or when we are just when we are too busy about anything, no? So that's being mindful, no? It's really pausing and stopping and thinking about what is going on in my body, in my mind, and all throughout my senses. So that awareness is actually what brings about, as a result, a more peaceful parenting attitude or behaviors towards our children.
Thank you very much, Teacher Tin. I really like the idea that peaceful parenting is a never-ending journey. And especially at this point of the pandemic, I think that parents would have a lot of time to have me time, so that they'd be mindful with their actions.
That's true. Me time is really important. In fact, it's everybody's sanity saver, right? So, moms most especially, during this pandemic, the initial reaction of parents was, "Oh no, what will I do with my children? They will be stuck with me 24/7," and that in itself is of course is coming out of love, but then we need to take care of ourselves first. So I keep telling parents that, like in an airline emergency, you have to put on your oxygen mask first before you do your children, so that you will be more effective in parenting them.
Okay, so Teacher Tim, if one were to research peaceful parenting, the concept of restorative justice or reparations may come up, especially when addressing misbehavior. Can you please explain this concept and what is a practical application of this?
All right. Restorative justice is such a beautiful concept. It teaches us the values of empathy and accountability for one's actions, as well as repairing the harm done. So it is really making a way to make things right after committing a mistake that may have damaged a relationship. So any misbehavior will result in a damage to the relationship. Sometimes it's a damage to something, an object, the nasira and all that. But then it is a way to make things right. So I think it is a more loving alternative over punishment and shaming. And as Dr. Jennifer Freed, an expert in restorative practices in parenting, would attest, restorative parenting should be a shared philosophy by all members of the family for it to work. So it's a philosophy that should be ingrained deeply within the family. So if a family does not have the time or the inclination to communicate about harms committed and just wants to rule with power and discipline, then this approach would not work. So it really takes commitment in order to facilitate restorative practices in the home, or whether it is in the school or in the home. um, you have to be dedicated to the underlying values of restorative justice, that sense of accountability for one's own actions. It teaches us to be responsible for what we have caused if we are the one causing the harm, and it teaches us what are the effects to people involved in our lives when we commit something. So, as a practical application, it's also a mindful way of processing behavior. So, for example, if a child does something wrong, and then you ask the child, uh, "What were you thinking when you did this? When this happened?" No, and after you let the child talk about that, you ask, what do you think they felt, no, or whoever was affected felt about it. And so it puts the child's attention to the effect of his actions on others and not just on himself. So that's why I think it is a beautiful way to teach responsibility, because you draw it out from the child. You don't impose it on the child. You don't say, now you did this, and because of that he feels that way. So you don't explicitly say it. You let the child think about what happened, process it, and understand it, so that it will definitely be a learning experience, and the chances of repeating that same action will be minimal. So instead of in our culture, right? So we are very much used to a very authoritarian type of parenting, and I'm sure you were raised in that way as I was too. That if you don't obey immediately your parents, lagot ka, you will be punished, okay? Or so that sense of punishment is always there, and we fear that, and we think that that is discipline. But peaceful parenting offers an alternative to punishment and shaming, and instead is a more loving way of setting boundaries and limits with our children. And restorative justice is one way of doing that, by processing the behavior with our children carefully and lovingly.
I see. So, is there such a thing as a win-win solution when it comes to discipline?
Wow. You know, when we say win-win, I think that in that discipline, if we are really to go by its etymology, because discipline comes from the word disciple, and discipling, or to be a disciple, means to follow. And when we discipline children, my belief is that we should follow the lead of what is the developmental level of the child. So we have to be careful in um, in in implementing discipline measures with children for it to be a win-win solution. So it is really a matter of perspective. I think that discipline should always be a win-win solution. If we view discipline as punishing a child for whatever they do wrong, then it is a lose-lose situation. Parent loses because the behavior will persist, since the child lacks the understanding for what they did wrong. A win-win solution in discipline would be when the parent is able to effectively or lovingly communicate with the child in processing the misbehavior, and the child feels accountable, yet confident that he can try again and still feel loved by the parent. So Kasi 'di ba when we are reprimanded by parents, or when parents reprimand their children, there's always a tinge of anger or a tinge of impatience that comes along with it, no? And that is our reptilian brain reacting, our emotional selves reacting, and that's quite normal. However, if we do it more mindfully or peacefully, then we pause for a while and think, why is this making me feel that way? And then when you are at your best, when you are calm enough, that's the time you impose discipline. It's not, discipline doesn't mean you get mad at your child for doing something wrong at that moment. So that's not discipline, that's venting. Venting your own anger, right? So because it's not doing anything to the child. In fact, in peaceful parenting, it would even say otherwise, that it is quite damaging to children when we do so. So we need to be careful.